The Laguna Copperplate Inscription, the 900-year-old document that rewrote Philippine history. In 1989, near the mouth of the Lumbang River in Wawa, Laguna, a man operating a sand-dredging machine pulled up something that didn't belong with the gravel and silt. A thin sheet of copper, roughly the size of a hand, covered in unfamiliar, finely etched characters. He almost sold it as scrap metal. Instead, that small copper sheet would become one of the most important documents in Philippine history. Proof, in writing, that organized, literate society existed in the islands nearly 5 centuries before Magellan ever arrived. This is the story of the Laguna Copperplate Inscription. Part 1. A near miss with history. Let's sit with how close this artifact came to disappearing entirely. The man who found it had no idea what he was holding. To him, it was a strange, old piece of metal pulled from river sediment, the kind of find a scrap dealer might pay a few pesos for, and the kind of find that, melted down, vanishes from the historical record forever. Instead, the copper plate found its way to a buyer who recognized it might be significant, and eventually to the National Museum of the Philippines, where it landed on the desk of a Dutch anthropologist and linguist named Antoon Postma, a man who had spent decades studying ancient Southeast Asian scripts. What Postma saw under that lamplight would take him months to fully decode, and what he eventually read rewrote the opening chapter of Philippine history. Part 2. A language from a lost world. The script on the plate wasn't Spanish. It wasn't any Philippine language written in Latin letters. It was something far older, a variant of Kawi script, an ancient writing system used across Java and other parts of maritime Southeast Asia, closely associated with Old Malay and Old Javanese. For a document like this to exist in the Philippines at all is remarkable. It means whoever inscribed it wasn't working in isolation. They were drawing on a script and a legal administrative tradition shared with the wider Hindu-Buddhist influenced world of early Java, Sumatra, and the Malay Peninsula. Postma worked through the inscription character by character, cross-referencing it against known Old Malay and Old Javanese inscriptions from Indonesia. Slowly, a date emerged from the text, expressed in the Indian-derived Saka calendar system, a date corresponding to April 21st, 900 CE by most scholarly readings. 900 years before that scrap metal dealer might have melted it down. 900 years before it was found at all. 6 centuries before Magellan's ships ever appeared on the horizon. This was no longer just an old object. It was a dated legal document, and the oldest known written document ever found in the Philippines. Part 3. What the document actually says. So what does it say? Not a creation myth, not a royal proclamation. Something almost startlingly mundane. And that mundanity is exactly what makes it so valuable. The inscription records the forgiveness of a debt. A person named Nam Waran, along with his children, is released from an obligation described in terms of gold, roughly equivalent, by some scholarly estimates, to a substantial quantity of gold by weight. The debt is cancelled by an official tied to the leadership of a polity referred to in the text as Tundun, generally associated by historians with the Tondo area, near the mouth of the Pasig River, close to what later became Manila. The text also references other place names that researchers have worked for decades to identify, names that may correspond to Paila, Pularan, and Binwangan, regions in the vicinity of Bulacan and Laguna provinces. And it names officials and titles, reflecting a structured legal and administrative hierarchy, not just a chief and his followers, but ranked positions with the authority to forgive formal debts and witness legal transactions. A debt cancellation may sound unglamorous compared to gold thrones or hidden treasure. But think about what it actually proves. A society organized enough to formalize debt in writing, with administrative officials empowered to cancel it, using a calendar system shared with the broader Indianized world, inscribed on a durable material meant to last, which, as it turns out, it did for 900 years. Part 4. Why this changes the story. Before this copperplate surfaced, the standard narrative of pre-colonial Philippine history rested almost entirely on outside sources. Chinese court annals, describing trade missions, and much later, Spanish chronicles like Pigafetta's account of Magellan's expedition. Indirect evidence, almost always filtered through a foreign observer's eyes. The Laguna Copperplate Inscription is different. It is, as far as current scholarship can determine, a document written by a Philippine polity for its own administrative and legal purposes, not a foreigner's description of the islands, but a fragment of the island's own bureaucratic voice, speaking directly across 9 centuries. And the world it reveals is not an isolated one. The shared script, the Saka calendar date, the legal terminology, all of it ties the Tondo area polity, referenced in the inscription, into the same broad Hindu-Buddhist administrative and cultural sphere that shaped contemporary Java and Sumatra. This is physical, datable, textual evidence that the influence visible in artifacts like Butuan's golden Tara wasn't an isolated curiosity. It was part of a coherent, shared political and legal culture stretching across maritime Southeast Asia, with the Philippines fully inside that world, not on its periphery. Part 5. The questions that remain. No discovery this significant arrives without debate, and responsible telling of this story has to include it. Some researchers have raised questions over the decades about specific aspects of translation and interpretation. The precise reading of certain place names, the exact administrative relationships between the named officials, and how confidently we can map terms like Tundun onto present-day Tondo versus other possible locations. Because the copper plate was recovered by a dredging operation rather than a controlled archaeological excavation, its original burial context, what else might have surrounded it, what site it came from before the river disturbed it, is permanently lost. These are exactly the kinds of open questions serious historical scholarship is supposed to leave room for. The broad conclusions, its age, its script, its content as a debt forgiveness document, its ties to the wider Indianized world, are well supported and widely accepted among historians and epigraphers. The finer details of geography and political structure remain an active, ongoing area of research, refined as new comparative inscriptions and scholarship emerge from across Southeast Asia. Part 6. A small object with an outsized legacy. Today, the Laguna Copperplate Inscription is held by the National Museum of the Philippines, recognized as a national cultural treasure, a designation reserved for the most historically significant objects in the country. Its significance is hard to overstate. This single, modest sheet of copper, nearly lost to a scrap dealer's furnace, single-handedly pushed back the earliest confirmed date of organized, literate society in the Philippines by centuries. It transformed the conversation around pre-colonial Philippine history from "What did outsiders observe about these islands?" to "What can we recover in the island's own administrative voice?" And it raises an uncomfortable, important question about everything we don't yet know. If a single sand-dredging operation in one river in Laguna could surface a document this consequential, one that very nearly became scrap metal, what else might still be sitting in riverbeds, foundations, and unexamined ground across the archipelago, waiting either for careful excavation or for accidental, irreversible loss? The Laguna Copperplate Inscription doesn't describe a battle, a dynasty, or a treasure. It describes something smaller and, in its own way, more convincing. A debt, forgiven, recorded carefully enough to outlast the empire that wrote it by nearly 1,000 years. It is proof that long before any outside power tried to write the story of these islands, the islands were already writing their own.
Before we go deeper, our goal on this video is to get 500 likes and share your reaction in the comments. Subscribe to the channel